The restaurant was alive with noise, a symphony of clinking chopsticks, the hum of overlapping conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter. The air was thick with the aroma of sizzling meats and steaming broths, a comforting chaos that enveloped everyone in its warmth. Patrons sat shoulder to shoulder, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of hanging lanterns, all engrossed in their meals and the company they kept. No one noticed the man in the corner. He sat alone, tucked away in a shadowed nook where the light barely reached. His appearance was a stark contrast to the lively scene around him. His t-shirt, once vibrant, was now faded and coated in a fine layer of dust, as though he had wandered in from a desert storm. His face was weathered, his skin tanned and rough, and his hair a tangled mess that spoke of days, or perhaps weeks, without care. But it was his right arm that drew the most attention, tightly wrapped in bandages that hinted at a story untold. Despite his disheveled state, he ate with a quiet determination, savoring every bite as though it were his first meal in days. When his plate was nearly empty, he reached for the bottle of water in front of him. His left hand fumbled with the cap, twisting and tugging, but it refused to budge. He frowned, his brow furrowing as he tried again, this time with more force. Still, the cap stayed firmly in place. A flicker of frustration crossed his face, but he quickly masked it, not wanting to draw attention. He glanced around, ensuring no one had noticed his struggle, then sighed and set the bottle down. For a moment, he simply stared at it, his jaw tightening as a wave of helplessness washed over him. It wasn't just the bottle, it was the way his body betrayed him, a constant reminder of the independence he had lost. From across the room, a pair of curious eyes watched him. The girl was young, no more than 10, with golden hair that caught the light like a halo. She had noticed the man the moment he walked in, his presence a quiet anomaly in the bustling restaurant. There was something about him, the way he carried himself, the way he seemed to shrink into the shadows, that had piqued her curiosity. When she saw him struggle with the bottle, her heart ached in a way she couldn't quite explain. She turned to her mother, who sat beside her, sipping tea from a delicate porcelain cup. "Mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the din. "Can I help him?" Her mother paused, her gaze shifting to the man in the corner. She studied him for a moment, her eyes softening with understanding. "Go ahead, love," she said gently. "Sometimes the smallest gestures mean the most." The girl hesitated, her courage wavering for just a moment, but then she stood and made her way to the man's table. He looked up as she approached, his eyes widening in surprise. Before he could say a word, she picked up the bottle, gave the cap a quick twist, and set it back down in front of him. The cap popped open with a soft hiss. "There you go," she said, her voice as light as a breeze. She smiled, a simple, genuine smile that lit up her face, and then turned to walk away. The man stared at the bottle, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. For a moment, he was frozen, his hand hovering in midair as though unsure what to do next. Then, slowly, he reached out and wrapped his fingers around the bottle, the coolness of the water seeping into his skin. He took a sip, the liquid soothing his dry throat, but it wasn't just the water that brought him relief. It was her. That small, seemingly insignificant act of kindness had cracked open something inside him. A door he had thought was locked forever. He felt a lump rise in his throat, his vision blurring as emotions he had buried deep within began to surface. He wasn't sad because he couldn't open the bottle. He was sad because he had felt so utterly alone, so defeated by the world and the weight of his own limitations. But her gesture, so simple and pure, had reminded him that he wasn't alone, that there was still goodness in the world, even in the darkest of corners. As the girl returned to her table, her mother reached out and squeezed her hand. "You did a good thing," she said, her voice warm with pride. The girl glanced back at the man, her heart swelling with a strange mix of happiness and sadness. She didn't know his story, but she didn't need to. All she knew was that, for a brief moment, she had made a difference. The man sat in silence for a long time, the bottle of water cradled in his hands. His mind wandered, replaying the events of the past weeks, the accident, the pain, the slow, agonizing recovery. He had always prided himself on his independence, on his ability to face any challenge head-on. But the injury had taken that from him, leaving him feeling broken and useless. He had begun to wonder if he would ever feel whole again. But now, as he sat in that crowded restaurant, surrounded by strangers, he felt something shift within him. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a flicker of hope, a spark of resilience. The girl's kindness had reminded him that he was still capable of receiving help, of connecting with others, even in his most vulnerable state. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was enough. He took another sip of water, the cool liquid grounding him in the present. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to smile, a small, tentative smile, but a smile nonetheless. The road ahead would still be long and difficult, but he knew now that he didn't have to walk it alone. As the man finished his meal and prepared to leave, he glanced once more at the girl and her mother. They were laughing now, their faces glowing with joy, and he felt a surge of gratitude for the unexpected gift they had given him. He didn't know their names, and he would likely never see them again, but their kindness would stay with him, a beacon of light in the darkness. He stood, his movements slow but deliberate, and made his way to the door. The noise of the restaurant faded behind him as he stepped out into the night, the cool air brushing against his skin. He took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm settle over him. The world was still harsh, still unpredictable, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it. Dear friend, thank you for taking the time to watch our story. Sometimes it's the smallest acts of kindness that leave the biggest impact. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes. Until then, remember, even in the darkest moments, there is always a flicker of light. You just have to look for it.